Okay, so this is for April 13th, where we're just going to learn how to do quadratic factoring and formula. The first 5 are going to be for factoring, while the remainder 5, it says solve by using the quadratic formula. Let's look at the first one. So it says x squared plus 13 plus 40 equals to 0. How are we going to factor? So factoring is the main game. How are we supposed to do that? If you remember anything about factoring, it looks like an x. So the first thing you should do is always draw your x. Now, when you do that, what's going to go into this x? Two things go into the x, the 13 and the 40. The 13, the middle number, goes on top, while the number on the bottom is going to be 40. Our job is to figure out those other two numbers. What goes into the left, what goes into the right. So for us, we're going to think about ways to get 40. So let's think about different ways to get 40. 1 times 40 is one of them. Let's think of another, maybe the number 2. 2 times 20. 3 can't go into 40, so we'll try the next one. We'll do 4 times 10. And then lastly, 5 times 8. That's the last that makes 40. Now I'm looking at these 4 choices, and I'm going to ask myself, which out of them can give me 13? The first one is 1 and 40. That one can't get me 13, because 1 and 40 makes 41 or something like that. So that doesn't work. 2 and 20 doesn't work. That can't get me 13. 10 and 4, very close, but not quite. That gives me 14. So the last one I can choose is 5 and 8. So that's what belongs in the x. Now that I have these two things, I can set up the factoring. I notice that once I have 5 and 8, I'm going to plug it in. So that'll be x plus 5 times x plus 8 equals to 0. And we want to solve for x. Now, trick here is, yes, you do see 5 and 8, so you would think it's answer choice C, but one thing you have to do is you have to change the sign. So in this case, instead of positive 5, it would be negative 5. Instead of positive 8, it would be negative 8. And so that's our final answer. Our answer choice is going to be D for number 1. Okay, so now for number 2, we have the same thing. X squared minus 36x plus 35 equals to 0. Again, since it says factoring, what are we going to do again? We're going to set up the x. In this case, we'll put negative 36 and positive 35 on the bottom. Once we have that, figure out the two numbers that makes 35. There are 2 of them. It's 1 times 35. And then the other, which is 5 times 7. Now, if I'm looking at these, one is very clear. 5 and 7, there's no way that I can make 36 by adding, so we can just cross that off. So my last and only choice is going to be 1 and 35. But there's a problem. If I do 1 plus 35, that gives me positive 36. The thing about this is that it has negative 36. So what are we going to do? One thing that we can do is that we can make both the 1 and the 35 negative. How come? Well, a negative times a negative does give me positive. Negative 1 times negative 35 gives me positive 35. And this checks out. Negative 1 minus 35 is negative 36. So I have my factored form. I'm going to write it again. So I'm going to write x minus 1 times x minus 35 equals to 0. And just like before, I'm going to reverse the signs for my final answer. In this case, x would equal to positive 1 and positive 35, because I'm switching from negative 1 to positive 1, negative 35 to positive 35. So once again, I'm looking at my answer choices, and the answer to that is D once again. Now let's look at number 3. Number 3 this time looks a little bit different. If we notice, there's a 2 in front of the factoring. So what am I going to do with that 2? It doesn't look like the other ones. What you can do is you can take this 2 and multiply it to the 3. So let's do 2 times 3. 2 times 3, that's 6. So I can set it up as x squared plus 7x plus 6 equals to 0. Okay, now I have something that looks familiar. I'm going to set up the x method one more time, putting 7 on the top, 6 on the bottom, and figuring out two numbers that multiply to 6 and adds to 7. Those two numbers should be 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Which one adds to 7? 2 and 3 can't make 7, so that's wrong. So all I'm left with is 1 and 6. Just like before, we're just going to write, and I don't want to write the factor form just yet. I just want to write the answer. So instead of positive 1 that I see here, it's going to be negative 1. And instead of positive 6, it becomes negative 6. But there's one thing that we did. One thing we did was that we multiplied by 2. And so what we want to do instead is do the opposite. What would that be? In this case, what it would be is that I need to divide. So what I need to do is I need to divide both of them by 2. So what happens? Okay, if I divide it, I get x equals to negative 1/2. And then I get negative 6 divided by 2, which is negative 3. And so that's our final answer. Now, if you accidentally look, I noticed that for number 3, all the answer choices are wrong. And so we're just going to box negative 1/2 and negative 3 and cross out A through D. So your answer should have been negative 1/2 and negative 3, not the answer choices. Question 4 is going to be the same thing. 12x squared 29x plus 15 equals to 0. I need to get rid of that 12. In order for me to get rid of that 12, I multiply. So when I do, I'm going to do x squared plus 29x, and then I have to multiply this, which should give me 180, I believe, and that equals to 0. When we do that, all we need to do is just set up the x method again. So we're just going to set up the x and just say 29 on top, 180 on bottom, and figure out different ways to get 180. 180 is a big number, and so we're just going to go through this one by one. So let's go through them. 1 times 80, that makes no way 29. 2 times 90, not close, but we're getting a little bit smaller. 3 times 60, no, again, that doesn't give us our answer. Let's keep on going. 4 times 45, no, not quite. 5 times, I believe this should be 26, I believe. And then next, oh no, sorry, I believe that should be 36. Whoops. 6 times 30 is the next one. And notice I'm just going through each number carefully. 7 doesn't really work. 8 doesn't really work. And all I'm left with is 9. So I'm going to say 9 times 20. Okay, so I'm looking at all of them, and the only one that I see, outside of maybe the next one, which is 10 times 18, the only one I see that gets us 29 is 9 and 20. So I'm going to write that into the box. 9 times 20. But that makes sense. 9 times 2 gives me 18, so that matches with everything that I have. Now that I have the 9 and 20, just like before, solve for x. X equals, instead of positive 9, it becomes negative 9. And instead of positive 20, it becomes negative 20. One more thing, though. We want to undo this. We want to, instead of multiplying by 12 for our final answer, we want to divide by 12. So I'm going to write that as part of the answer. Now, you might notice in this problem that we don't actually have 9, 12, 20, and 12. We need to simplify. One thing you can do in your calculator, or just from your knowledge of fractions, is just take the division and simplify the fractions. This would have gave you negative 3 over 4, and the one on the top should have gave you negative 5 over 3. And that's the answer to our problem. That gives us answer choice C. Okay, this leads us with our final thing. 4x squared, 8x plus 3. As a shout out to my period 3, Aaron and Ivan, for some reason, wanted this shout out. They realized that, again, just like before, how do I get rid of the 4? All you have to do is multiply 4 times the 3, and then you set it up again. 4 times 3 gives us 12, so we're going to say x squared plus 8x plus 12 equals to 0. Setting up the x method once again, 8 goes on top, 12 goes on bottom, and I need to figure out 2 ways to get me 12. So the first one is 1 and 12, 2 and 6, then 3 and 4. Is there any way I can get 8? Yes, we can. 2 and 6. I have my whole x method, so I'm going to just solve it and say x equals to negative 2 and negative 6, changing the signs. The last and final step I need to do, we multiply by 4, but we do the opposite this time, making it negative 4. So there's some answers I can eliminate. C is off, D is off, A is off, and we're only left with what should have been the right answer, which should have been B, but I accidentally typed the wrong thing, because when you simplify it, negative 2 over 4 is negative 1/2, while the other one should be negative 3 over 2. So that's the right answer. If you want, again, B would be the wrong answer, and we'll just box it again, and that's my apologies. So this is the way that we just do factoring. All we have to do is set up the X method, where we figure out two numbers that multiply to the last one and adds to the middle one. And we can do this even when there's a number in front of x squared, simply by multiplying and doing the reverse. Make sure you always do the opposite sign, just because when you do the opposite sign, you'll get the right answer. And that concludes today's video.